picture this. You're sitting alone in a room, right?
Right.
And the afternoon light is just slowly fading out. It's turning the walls that really familiar muted shade of gray.
Yeah, that twilight feeling.
Exactly. And right in front of you, there's a blank screen. Or, I mean, maybe it is an unsent message or some untouched project or even just a pair of running shoes you promised yourself you would put on.
But you haven't.
But you haven't, and the room around you is just slightly out of order. Like, there is a mounting stack of papers on the desk, maybe an unmade bed in the corner, a coffee cup from yesterday.
The visual clutter is definitely building up.
Yeah, and there is this heavy, almost suffocating feeling pressing down on your chest. You were waiting...
Just completely stalled.
Right. You were waiting for the perfect moment. You were waiting for a sudden, magical spark of motivation to finally strike you.
Which rarely ever happens.
Never happens. But you are caught in this paralyzing loop. You convince yourself that gathering just a little more information or, I don't know, waiting until tomorrow when you feel slightly more rested is a vital form of preparation.
Feels like preparation, yeah.
It really does. But if we are being completely honest with ourselves, it feels like a slow, agonizing surrender to stagnation. You just feel entirely trapped in the stillness.
It's an incredibly heavy space to be in.
It really is. So, welcome to our analysis today. We are embarking on this expansive exploration of an amazing stack of clinical psychology papers, neurological studies on behavioral inertia, and environmental psychology.
There is a vast constellation of insights in this material.
Absolutely. And our mission here is to understand the invisible architecture of human transformation. We want to deconstruct exactly how our internal states construct the physical world around us, and more importantly, how you can break free from that suffocating loop of paralysis.
I mean, it is a profound, almost universal human experience you just described.
Right. Everyone knows that gray room.
Everyone. And the immense weight of that paralysis is rarely a lack of inherent ability. But we tend to internalize that heavy feeling as a deeply rooted flaw in our character.
Oh, for sure. We think, I'm just broken.
Exactly. We sit in that fading light and think we're fundamentally flawed or somehow entirely lacking the intrinsic drive that the overwhelming majority of other people just seem to naturally possess.
Like everyone else has this secret engine that we just missed out on.
Right. But it is not a character defect at all. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of how human biology, action, and physical reality actually interact.
Okay, so we're misinterpreting the signals.
Completely. We treat the stillness of that room as if it is a neutral waiting area,
Yeah.
like a perfectly safe sanctuary where we are protected from harm while we slowly gather our strength.
Right, like we are simply paused. We really do treat life like a media player. We think we can hit pause and the action stops, but nothing degrades. Like the characters just freeze on the screen, the plot holds its breath, and everything remains pristine until we decide we are finally ready to hit play again.
Which is a complete illusion.
Right, because human psychology and physical reality do not possess a pause button.
They absolutely do not. Waiting is never a neutral state.
Never.
Never. It is an environment of active, compounding decay. Time is not a passive backdrop, It exacts a heavy toll on hesitation.
Wow, an active decay. That is a terrifying way to look at it, but so accurate.
It is, because there is this pervasive logical fallacy built into our cognitive framework that dictates we must feel a sense of absolute readiness before we initiate action.
Oh, the I need to feel ready trap.
The ultimate trap. We wait for readiness to arrive like a train pulling into a station. Like, oh, here comes the Readiness Express, now I can start.
But the train never comes.
It doesn't. Because neurobiological realities tell us a completely different story. Readiness and clarity are the downstream byproducts of motion, not the prerequisites.
Wait, say that again? They are the byproducts.
Yes, they are generated in the wake of action. You don't get them before you move.
So the action itself creates the readiness.
Exactly. If you examine the architecture of human transformation, the belief in the arrival of a perfect moment is perhaps the most destructive cognitive illusion we harbor.
Because it keeps you in the active decay.
Right. The longer the physical body and the mind remain stalled, the heavier the neurological friction of inertia grows.
Okay, but if the illusion of the perfect moment is so incredibly destructive, why is our brain so deeply committed to it?
Because the brain is trying to protect you.
I mean, we say things to ourselves like, I will start when the economic timing is better, or I will initiate this difficult conversation when I feel truly emotionally grounded.
It sounds so rational.
It sounds incredibly reasonable. We decorate our hesitation with this beautiful, flawless logic. We don't feel like we are self-sabotaging.
No, we feel like we are being deeply prudent.
Exactly. So what is actually happening there?
Well, it is a magnificent disguise crafted by the amygdala.
The fear center.
Right. We are neurologically wired to be exceptional at dressing our primal fear up in the sophisticated clothing of rationality.
That is fascinating. So the logic is just a costume.
A very convincing costume.
Yeah.
The brain is an energy conservation machine, right?
Yeah.
And any venture into the unknown requires a massive expenditure of metabolic energy.
So it wants to stay parked.
Exactly. If you strip all of those highly logical sounding excuses down to their barest anatomical reality, what you find underneath is an acute fear response.
It's raw fear.
Raw fear is the fear of the unknown, the fear of social judgment, the fear of rejection, or just this fatalistic fear of failure.
And we just rebrand it as waiting for the right time.
Precisely. The tragedy of the modern human condition is that we treat these fear responses as mandatory stop signs.
We feel the spike of anxiety and we just retreat.
Right, we immediately interpret it as a signal to wait. But fear is actually a highly calibrated compass.
That compass, how so?
It points directly toward the edge of something that profoundly matters to your internal growth. If the outcome did not matter to your psychological evolution, there would be no fear response generated in the first place.
Oh, wow. So if you don't care, you don't feel the fear.
Exactly.
So by retreating from the fear, by sitting in that graying room and waiting for the anxiety to naturally subside, we are actually feeding the exact neurological loop that is keeping us paralyzed.
You're feeding it, yes.
We are basically rewarding the brain for avoiding the work.
Precisely. And when the human mind is left entirely unoccupied by forward momentum, it doesn't naturally settle into a state of Zen-like peace.
No, it definitely doesn't. It usually spirals.
It activates what neuroscientists refer to as the default mode network.
Okay, the default mode network. What is that exactly?
Think of it as the brain's idling state. And it is a highly receptive ground for rumination, doubt, and despair.
It's where the overthinking lives.
Exactly. Think of a human mind like an endless tide in a complex ecosystem. If the water doesn't flow forward, if the current is abruptly stopped, it does not remain pristine.
It turns into a swamp.
It becomes a stagnant pool. And what biological processes occur in stagnant water?
Oh, toxicity breeds.
Exactly. The microscopic shadows multiply. Action is the physical current that oxygenates and purifies the stream.
I love that analogy. Action oxygenates the stream.
Yes. Stillness, when it is laced with chronic avoidance, operates as an open invitation for psychological darkness to take root.
So how do we flush the stream?
The moment you introduce physical movement, no matter how microscopic, you force the brain to switch from the default mode network to the task-positive network.
The task-positive network.
Right. You crowd out the rumination. You literally starve the fear of the cognitive bandwidth it requires to breathe.
Okay, but let me challenge the mechanics of that transition for a second.
Sure.
Because when people finally realize they need to move, their immediate instinct is to make some massive, earth-shattering leap.
Right, the grand gesture.
Exactly. We think we need to go from sitting in the dark, entirely depressed, to running a full marathon the next morning.
Which is a terrible idea.
Or we think we need to go from being completely disorganized to launching a massive corporate enterprise overnight. And the sheer scale of that demanded action terrifies the nervous system all over again.
It triggers the exact same fear response.
Right. It is like trying to start a campfire by demanding a raging inferno instantly, rather than just being willing to strike a solitary spark.
That's a perfect way to phrase it.
But here's my question. Does a tiny microscopic spark actually do anything?
Yes, it does.
I mean, does just lacing up a pair of shoes without actually going for a run genuinely change the brain chemistry, or is that just a comforting trick we play on ourselves?
It genuinely alters the chemistry.
Yeah.
And it is entirely necessary because that demand for an instant inferno is really just another highly sophisticated form of procrastination.
Oh, wait. Really? Expecting too much of yourself is procrastination?
Absolutely. It is the ego setting an impossibly high standard so that it never actually has to face the vulnerability of a small, unglamorous beginning.
Wow, I can't run 10 miles, so I won't run at all.
Exactly. The physics of action dictate that the initial spark is never about scale. It is strictly about establishing direction.
Direction, not scale.
Right. When you are paralyzed, the friction cost of task switching is enormous. The brain perceives the gap between doing nothing and doing something massive as an insurmountable chasm.
It just looks too wide to jump.
So by reducing the action to an absurdly small requirement, like simply putting on your walking shoes and giving yourself full permission to take them right back off,
You bypass the alarm system.
you bypass the amygdala's threat detection system entirely.
You literally sneak past your own internal security guards.
Exactly. You lower the metabolic cost of the action to near zero. But the physical kinesthetic act of tying the laces still forces the brain to shift into the task-positive network.
Because you're doing something.
Right. It breaks the paralyzing circuit. It shifts your physiological state from idle to active.
And that's enough to get the water flowing again.
Yes. And once that tiny spark of momentum kicks in, it carries a very real gravitational pull. The dopamine released by completing that tiny task naturally compels the brain to seek the next logical step.
So you tie the shoes, and then you think, well, I might as well stand up.
Exactly. And then I might as well walk to the door. The overwhelming majority of monumental transformations throughout the passage of eras did not begin with a massive leap of unwavering certainty.
They started with a spark.
They began with a micro-movement in the dark, a tiny exertion of will that generated just enough forward momentum for clarity to slowly reveal itself.
Okay, so if the micro movement is the spark that gives us momentum, we still face a massive problem of navigation, right?
I mean,
Well, frantic movement in the completely wrong direction just leads to exhaustion and deeper despair. If we are standing in the dark and we finally strike that spark, how do we determine which direction to actually walk?
that is the critical next step.
Mm-hmm.
Random movement might generate some temporary heat, but it cannot build a sustainable structure.
Right.
To change your long-term trajectory, you must stop looking out the window for external saviors and start looking directly into the mirror.
Into the mirror.
Yes. You have to undergo an audit of brutal clarity.
A brutal audit.
You must relentlessly examine the raw, unvarnished truth of your physical vitality, your material resources, the actual depth of your social connections, and your internal baseline of self-respect.
Okay, wait. I need to challenge this idea of a brutal audit.
Go ahead.
If someone is already sitting in that room, suffocating under the weight of paralysis, forcing them to stare at their entirely depleted bank account, or forcing them to confront the painful reality of their failing relationships, that seems dangerous.
You do feel that way, yes.
It seems like it would trigger a massive spike in cortisol, leading to a complete panic response. How does looking at a terrifying reality spark action instead of just causing a total psychological shutdown?
That is a crucial distinction to make. The panic response is triggered not by the raw data itself, but by the ego's attachment to the data.
What do you mean by attachment to the data?
When we look at a depleted bank account and feel panic, it is because we are interpreting that number as a final, damning judgment of our worth as a human being.
Oh, right. We think, I am a failure.
Exactly. A successful audit requires separating your core identity from your current coordinates.
Coordinates, like on a map.
Yes, you have to view the elements of your life exactly as a pilot views the instruments on a dashboard.
Okay, I like this analogy.
If an airplane is losing altitude, the pilot does not take the altimeter reading as a personal insult.
Right, they don't sit there and think, I'm a terrible pilot, the sky hates me.
No, they don't collapse into self-loathing. They simply recognize that the current trajectory requires an immediate mechanical adjustment.
That is such a powerful shift in perspective.
The brutal audit is terrifying only as long as you remain in denial. The moment you accept the data purely as starting coordinates, the cortisol spike subsides.
And then the brain can actually work again.
Exactly. The executive functioning centers of the brain can begin mapping a route forward.
So it is really about removing the moral judgment from the mess.
Entirely.
But this idea of taking stock goes deeper into environmental psychology, doesn't it? Because the physical environment around us isn't just a random collection of objects.
No, it's not random at all.
I mean, I have seen theories bordering on quantum mechanics suggesting our reality is highly reactive to our consciousness, like the observer effect.
Right, those theories are out there.
But let us ground this. We don't need to invoke esoteric physics to explain why a messy room matters. What is the actual psychological link between our internal state and our physical surroundings?
The link is direct, continuous, and highly measurable. We don't need to rely on quantum mysticism when cognitive science provides a perfectly clear explanation.
Okay, what is the cognitive explanation?
The environment you occupy is a visible physical manifestation of your internal executive functioning.
So my room is my brain.
Essentially, yes. If your mind is chronically overwhelmed, chaotic, and aggressively avoiding responsibility, that internal cognitive load inevitably spills outward.
It leaks into the room.
Right. A cluttered desk is an overloaded, fragmented mind rendered visible in physical space.
Wow.
When you are mentally exhausted, the brain conserves energy by ignoring the physical environment. And over time, this creates a devastating feedback loop.
How does the loop work?
Visual clutter constantly competes for your attention. Even if you think you're ignoring it, you aren't. It forces the visual cortex to process an excessive amount of stimuli, which actively drains your cognitive reserves and chronically elevates cortisol levels.
So the messy room is not just a symptom, it becomes an active cause of further paralysis.
It is actively draining your energy while you sit there.
That is wild. So if the environment operates as a mirror, reflecting our internal state back to us, then we completely lose the comforting blanket of victimhood.
You lose it entirely.
We cannot look at the decaying elements of our life and claim we are just terribly unlucky.
No, you cannot logically claim to be the helpless victim of a reality you are unconsciously orchestrating through your own neglect.
It is exactly like standing in front of a mirror, becoming absolutely furious at the reflection in the glass because it happens to be wearing a hat,
Right.
and then violently demanding that the glass take the hat off. All the while, you are completely refusing to reach up and remove the hat from your own head.
That is a brilliant metaphor.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what we do. We spend a vast magnitude of our energy trying to rearrange the external reflection.
Oh, totally. People change jobs, they abruptly end relationships, they move across the country to new cities.
Desperately hoping the fresh scenery will solve the internal ache.
Right. But because we carry our internal cognitive patterns with us, the new environment rapidly reshapes itself to mirror the exact same unresolved chaos.
That is the tragedy of geographical cures.
Yeah.
You can't escape your own mind.
No matter how far you drive.
Exactly. And this dynamic is perfectly illustrated by the physical concept of entropy applied to human behavior.
Entropy, like in physics.
Yes. Entropy is the natural, inexorable tide pulling all organized systems toward a state of disorder and chaos.
Everything falls apart eventually.
Everything. A clean room does not spontaneously maintain its cleanliness. A physical body does not maintain muscular vitality without constant, deliberate exertion.
Right. If you stop working out, the muscle fades.
Because order does not naturally sustain itself in the universe. Consciousness and energy are required to sustain it.
So maintaining order is an active rebellion against chaos.
Exactly. When you organize your resources, when you finally hold a difficult, clarifying conversation with a partner, when you clean your physical workspace, you are quite literally stamping your conscious will into reality.
You are fighting the entropy.
You are actively pushing back against the endless tide. An ordered environment is the undeniable physical proof of a conscious mind asserting its authority over chaos.
And if you don't?
Wherever your focused attention withdraws, entropy immediately reclaims the territory.
So, if we look around and see a dying houseplant, a project that has been stalled for a calendar year, or a relationship that has grown totally silent and strained, we are not looking at random bad luck.
No.
We are looking at the exact coordinates where our conscious attention has retreated.
Yes, it is a ruthless but entirely honest feedback loop.
Brutal clarity.
Exactly. And this mirroring effect extends deeply into human social dynamics and interpersonal friction too.
Oh, really? How does it affect the people around us?
Well, if we connect this environmental reflection to a broader psychological framework, consider the people in your life who constantly irritate, anger, or deeply disappoint you.
Okay, I've got a few in mind.
We all do. That sounds like we are wading into the territory of psychological projection.
The idea that the external irritations are actually internal shadows.
It is the core mechanism of projection. The cognitive traits that trigger the most intense, disproportionate emotional reactions in us are frequently the very traits we have actively suppressed within our own psyche.
Okay, this is an incredibly tough pill to swallow for anyone.
It is very confronting.
If I am constantly infuriated by a colleague I perceive as incredibly arrogant and boastful, how is that mirroring something inside me? I am not arrogant. I actively dislike arrogance.
The intensity of your dislike is the actual clue.
The intensity.
Yes, it forces you to question what specific permission you have denied yourself. Often, if a person vehemently judges arrogance in others, they are actually reacting to a distorted reflection of their own deeply suppressed confidence or ambition.
Wait, so because I won't let myself be confident, I hate seeing it in them.
Exactly. You might be completely terrified of expressing your own potential or taking up rightful space in a room out of a deeply ingrained fear of social judgment.
So to keep myself safe, I make myself small.
Right. You feign an excessive humility, and as a result, your subconscious intensely resents the person who freely gives themselves the permission to be visible and loud.
Oh, wow. I am mad at them for taking the permission I won't give myself.
The universe, through the frustrating behavior of that irritating person, is holding up a diagnostic mirror to the exact part of yourself you have buried.
That completely flips the script on how we interact with the world.
And changes everything.
Instead of viewing the daily environment as a series of random obstacles or viewing annoying people as villains sent to torment us, every single point of friction becomes a diagnostic tool.
Yes.
It is a breadcrumb leading directly back to a blind spot in our own cognitive processing.
When you begin to view reality through this specific diagnostic lens, the illusion of randomness shatters.
The mirror won't let you lie.
The external mirror will keep presenting the exact same pattern, the same frustrating dynamic, the same type of conflict with different faces, until you finally internalize the lesson and restore your own internal integrity.
It's like a repeating level in a video game until you beat the boss.
Precisely. And once you integrate that suppressed trait or resolve the internal conflict, the external reflection changes almost instantaneously.
Because you change the object in front of the mirror.
Right. The external friction dissolves not because the world magically changed, but because your internal frequency and reaction patterns have fundamentally shifted.
All right, so let us synthesize where we are in this journey.
Okay.
We understand that waiting is decay, and we have struck the microspark of action to break the paralysis.
Yes, tying the shoes.
Right. We have looked directly into the brutal, unforgiving mirror of our environment to see exactly where we stand, identifying the entropy and the projections.
We've done the audit.
So we have clarity, we have awareness, but awareness without a map is really just a heightened, highly educated state of panic.
It absolutely is.
I mean, we know exactly what is wrong, but we have no idea how to fix it. We need a blueprint.
A blueprint is entirely non-negotiable at this stage. Relying on vague intentions is completely useless against the heavy gravitational pull of deeply ingrained neural pathways.
Like saying, I'll do better tomorrow.
Right. Whispering, I will be better tomorrow, or I will try harder next time. It's like whispering into a hurricane.
It does nothing.
Nothing. A functional blueprint requires a distinct sequential architecture. It must consistently involve the continuous acquisition of knowledge, the relentless application of that knowledge, and eventually the achievement of a state of synergy.
Okay, the acquisition of knowledge seems obvious. We have to learn what to do. But I feel like this phase is actually an incredibly dangerous trap for highly intelligent people.
Oh, it is perhaps the most seductive trap that exists for the modern analytical mind.
Seduct of how?
We run the severe risk of becoming professional learners.
Professional learners, people who just read and read.
Exactly. We acquire the books, we listen to the complex analytical discussions, we gather an endless array of optimization frameworks, and the brain rewards us with a massive dopamine spike.
We feel productive.
We feel a profound rush of accomplishment just from the act of understanding the concept.
But we haven't actually done anything.
Right. Knowledge that is hoarded without the friction of physical execution does absolutely nothing but artificially inflate the ego. It creates a powerful neurochemical illusion of forward momentum, all while your physical reality remains perfectly still.
It is the ultimate form of preparing to prepare. We mistake the menu for the actual meal.
That is brilliant. Yes, staring at the menu doesn't feed you. This is why the second phase, relentless application, is so critical.
Application, doing the thing.
Application is where the pristine fantasy of the plan violently collides with the chaotic reality of the physical world.
A messy part.
It is where you are forced to take the theoretical knowledge out of the sterile, controlled classroom of your mind and expose it to the unpredictable friction of real life.
You actually have to build the thing or have the conversation.
Exactly. You must cycle rapidly between learning a concept and immediately doing the physical action until you reach the third phase.
Synergy.
Synergy. What does that look like in practice?
Synergy occurs when the boundary between learning and doing completely vanishes. You learn through the physical act of doing, and you continuously adjust your doing based on the real-time feedback of learning.
So they become one fluid motion. Exactly. The cognitive pathways merge, and your rate of growth begins to compound exponentially.
But here's the issue. Even with a perfectly constructed blueprint, The human brain cannot process massive simultaneous changes.
No, it cannot.
We cannot optimize our health, our finances, our relationships, and our careers on the exact same day.
That leads to instant burnout.
Right. And this is where the concept of the domino action becomes vital. How does identifying a single domino actually change the execution of a blueprint?
The domino action is the ultimate exercise in strategic leverage and energy conservation.
Okay, explain that.
When people finally decide to change, they often attempt to fight a vast multitude of different behavioral battles simultaneously.
I'm going to fix my entire life by Monday.
Exactly. They spread their limited cognitive bandwidth and willpower so thin that catastrophic failure across all domains is statistically guaranteed.
You just collapse under the weight of it.
Right. The master architect does not look at the multitude of problems. They scan the environment for the single highest leverage move.
The one thing.
They look for the one specific domino that, once tipped, causes a massive, effortless cascade, knocking down a multitude of other obstacles purely through the physics of momentum.
I love this, but give me a deeply tangible example of the domino mechanics, because I think we naturally tend to overcomplicate our strategies.
We do.
We think the domino has to be some massive, complex financial investment or a total career shift.
We overcomplicate them because we want the solution to match the perceived complexity of our suffering.
Oh, that's deep. If the pain is huge, the fix must be huge.
Exactly. But the true domino is almost always foundational and physiological.
Physiological.
Yes. Let us examine the physical resting cycle specifically. Cellular sleep.
Okay, sleep.
Imagine a person who is struggling with severe emotional instability, incredibly poor dietary impulse control, strained and volatile relationships, and a total lack of executive focus at work.
Basically a complete mess across the board.
A very common modern state, yes. A traditional flawed approach would be to create 4 different highly exhausting behavioral plans to address each individual issue.
A diet plan, a therapy plan, a work productivity app.
Right, which is exhausting.
Yeah.
But if they identify their resting cycle as their primary domino and they commit absolute unyielding focus to stabilizing it, a remarkable biological cascade occurs.
Walk me through the exact biological cascade. Why does sleeping fix a broken relationship?
It comes down to the prefrontal cortex.
The front part of the brain.
Right, the region of the brain responsible for complex decision-making, impulse control, and emotional regulation.
Okay.
When you are chronically sleep-deprived, the prefrontal cortex is effectively taken offline,
It just shuts down.
leaving the hyperreactive amygdala completely in charge.
The fear and anger center.
Exactly. You have no neurological braking system.
So you just react to everything.
Yes. By naturally elevating the physical resting cycle, you restore function to the prefrontal cortex.
So brakes come back online.
With the braking system back online, the impulsive craving for high-sugar, quick-fix junk food diminishes because the brain is no longer desperate for emergency glucose.
Boom. The diet improves.
Exactly. The emotional baseline stabilizes, which naturally injects a buffer of patience into their relational communications.
We stop snapping at their partner.
Right, because they have the cognitive bandwidth to regulate their tone. Their focus at work sharpens.
So by fixing the sleep,
By tipping one singular foundational biological domino, a vast constellation of complex behavioral obstacles are neutralized effortlessly.
it is the ultimate expression of working in harmony with our biology rather than fighting it.
It is leverage.
But I have to say, even with the knowledge of the domino, elaborate planning can easily morph into a sophisticated disguise for further procrastination.
It happens all the time.
We color code the spreadsheet, we buy the perfectly bound notebook, we map out the exact sequence of the dominoes, and the sun goes down, and we still haven't laced up the shoes.
You're stuck in the blueprint phase.
Exactly. How do we distinguish a genuine blueprint from a beautifully constructed fantasy?
The distinction is entirely based on immediate physical cost.
Physical cost.
If your complex plan does not compel you to take a physical, mildly uncomfortable action in the immediate present before you feel entirely ready, it is not a functional plan.
It's just a wish.
It is a psychological pacifier. The plan must serve merely as the runway to launch you into immediate motion, not as a comfortable destination where you park your ambitions.
Wow. Okay, so we are finally in motion. We have the blueprint. We are systematically knocking down the correct dominoes.
You're doing the work.
But here is the critical failure point where the overwhelming majority of people crash.
The relapse.
Yes, we execute the brilliant plan for a few weeks, maybe even a full season, and then slowly, invisibly, The elastic band of our old habits begins to snap back.
The tension gets too high.
We return to our previous baselines. It feels like our willpower is just a finite battery that eventually drains down to zero under the relentless weight of everyday stress.
That feeling is biologically accurate. Willpower is absolutely a finite resource.
It actually runs out.
It does. The phenomenon is known in cognitive psychology as ego depletion.
Ego depletion.
Yes. Every time you use sheer discipline to force a behavior that contradicts your underlying self-image, or every time you resist a deeply ingrained impulse, you are burning highly expensive metabolic energy.
So every time I force myself to the gym when I don't want to go, I'm burning that specific fuel.
You are literally depleting the glucose available to the executive centers of your brain.
Which explains why we always break our diets at night.
Exactly. The willpower battery is empty. Relying exclusively on sheer discipline for long-term transformation is exactly like trying to hold a highly pressurized beach ball underwater.
It's exhausting.
Eventually, your cognitive muscles fatigue, your attention inevitably drifts to a new stressor, and the ball violently explodes back to the surface.
So if willpower doesn't work long-term, what does?
True. Permanent behavioral change does not occur at the superficial level of daily habits. It must occur deep within the root system of human identity.
Identity.
It requires the psychological death of the old self-concept and the conscious, deliberate birth of a completely new identity.
Okay, the concept of identity feels very abstract.
It can, initially.
What does shifting an identity actually mean in the practical reality of a Tuesday morning? How is an identity fundamentally different from just having a really strong, clearly defined goal?
The distinction is paramount. A goal is purely focused on an external outcome, what you want to achieve.
Right, like losing weight or writing a book.
A routine is focused on the mechanics, what you do. But identity is the foundational core. It is about who you fundamentally believe you are.
Who you are.
The entire internal neurological landscape shifts when you transition your internal dialogue from, I am trying to act like this, to, I am the exact type of person who does this.
Give me an example of how that plays out.
Let us look at the psychology of an elite athlete. An athlete does not wake up at dawn and expend a massive amount of their limited willpower debating whether they should consume the correct fuel or whether they should attend their rigorous training session.
Right, there is no agonizing internal negotiation.
Exactly. There's zero negotiation because the behavior is an automatic, non-negotiable extension of their core identity.
It's just what an athlete does.
The physical action stops being an exhausting daily choice and simply becomes their default state of physiological existence.
Because their identity does the heavy lifting, not their willpower.
When your daily actions are firmly rooted in a new identity, the massive neurological friction of resistance completely dissolves. You are no longer fighting your own brain.
That makes total sense. But how do you cross the bridge from the old identity to the new one?
That is the hardest part.
Because I will tell you, when you first make the intellectual decision to adopt a new identity, it feels incredibly fraudulent.
It feels like a lie.
It triggers massive cognitive dissonance. If a person has spent the last decade being physically stagnant and eating poorly, looking into the mirror and declaring, I am an elite athlete, feels like a delusional lie.
The brain immediately rejects the statement.
It feels totally fake. How do you survive that phase without giving up?
It feels fake because you are standing in the highly uncomfortable twilight zone of neurological transition. You are stepping into a completely new psychological atmosphere.
And you aren't used to breathing the air.
Exactly. At first, the air in this new environment feels entirely foreign, and your lungs don't know how to process it. It is difficult to breathe.
So you panic.
Your deeply established neural pathways, your old identity are firing rapidly, screaming that you are an imposter, demanding that you return to familiar ground.
Go back to the couch, it's safer.
Right. But this is exactly where the mechanics of physical action must merge with the concept of identity. You do not change your identity through positive thinking.
Affirmations aren't enough.
You change it through undeniable physical evidence. Every single microscopic action you take is a physical vote cast in favor of this new identity.
A physical vote.
Yes.
So the brain needs a paper trail of evidence to believe the new story.
Precisely. The brain requires proof, not promises. Over the passage of eras, as you string together a vast constellation of remarkably average, steady efforts, those physical votes begin to mathematically stack up.
You just keep voting.
You don't need a flawless landslide victory on the very first day. You just need to continuously cast the small votes.
And what happens in the brain when you do?
Neuroplasticity takes over.
Huh.
The myelin sheath, the fatty tissue that insulates neural pathways and makes them fire faster, begins to thicken around the new behavioral loop.
It biologically reinforces the habit.
While the old pathways slowly atrophy from disuse, eventually the sheer weight of the physical evidence overpowers the old cognitive doubt.
And the imposter syndrome fades.
The new atmosphere becomes the baseline that feels natural, and the thought of returning to the old stagnant habits, the old atmosphere, is what suddenly feels toxic and entirely unbreathable.
You literally outgrow your old self.
Yes.
And I imagine a massive component of casting those daily votes is actively managing our internal language.
It is critical.
Because if we constantly walk around verbally referring to ourselves as, chronically lazy or terribly unlucky or naturally prone to failure, we are essentially locking the psychological chains onto our own ankles.
You are.
We are giving the brain a set of blueprints for a prison.
Internal language is not merely descriptive, it is entirely generative.
Generative, as in it creates reality.
It operates as an incredibly potent neurolinguistic self-fulfilling prophecy. When you apply the label lazy to your identity, you are not just describing a past behavior.
What are you doing then?
You are issuing a direct, authoritative command to your subconscious nervous system to manifest that reality in the present.
Wow, you are ordering yourself to be lazy.
You are priming your biology for lethargy. You must actively, ruthlessly rewrite that internal script.
Stop saying I'm lazy.
You must boldly declare the architecture of who you are becoming, even before the physical evidence has fully materialized.
Fake it till you make it, essentially.
And then you must aggressively gather the daily behavioral evidence to prove the new script true.
Okay, so we have assembled a massive engine of transformation here.
We really have.
We have the necessary spark of microaction to break the paralysis.
Heck.
We have the brutal, objective mirror of our physical reality to show us our coordinates.
Yeah.
We have the domino blueprint to ensure cognitive leverage. And we are actively rewiring the root system of our identity through the neuroplasticity of daily votes.
The engine is fully built.
It feels like an incredibly powerful, complete machine. But even with all of those perfect components, a high-performance engine cannot maintain pressure without a perfect seal.
No, it cannot.
It requires the final element of total, unyielding commitment.
This is the absolute final threshold.
Yeah.
And it is precisely the point where the overwhelming majority of people quietly turn back toward the comfort of the known.
Because it's scary.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
All of the profound self-awareness, the intricately mapped domino planning, and the deep neurological identity work will dissolve entirely without the final, unbreakable seal of absolute commitment. Yes. We exist in a societal structure that actively encourages a tepid, highly guarded, half-hearted approach to existence.
Hedging our bets.
We are taught to keep one foot firmly planted in the safety of our old life while tentatively dipping the other foot into the new life.
We constantly weave a safety net.
Which is really just a sophisticated, disguised form of avoidance designed to protect the fragile ego from the sharp sting of potential failure.
It is the classic, I will give this a try for a few weeks and see how it goes mentality.
Exactly.
It sounds incredibly balanced and healthy to our modern ears, but it is actually a hidden trapdoor we deliberately leave unlocked, so we can quietly escape the moment the friction becomes truly uncomfortable.
It is the ultimate form of psychological self-sabotage.
True.
Operating half-heartedly is paradoxically vastly more agonizing and neurologically exhausting than full, unreserved immersion.
Really? How is it more exhausting to have a safety net?
Because when you are only partially committed to a transformation, you are forcing your brain into a state of continuous, draining negotiation with your own resolve.
Ah, you're constantly deciding whether to stay or go.
You are burning massive amounts of metabolic energy, just deciding day after day whether you should even stay in the game.
That makes so much sense.
Amateurs seek peace of mind by playing it incredibly safe, by holding a reservist effort back so they can eventually comfort themselves by saying, well, I failed, but I didn't actually give it my absolute all anyway.
Protecting the ego.
But they never find true peace. They are forever haunted by the heavy ghost of their own withheld potential.
The what-ifs just eat them alive.
Exactly.
While the true professional, the person who has actually crossed the threshold of identity, operates on a completely different frequency.
The professional discovers an unbreakable, profound inner peace, completely independent of the external outcome.
Because they went all in.
Because they know with absolute certainty that they left absolutely nothing in reserve. If they triumph, they celebrate the victory. If they fall short, they still experience a profound, quiet internal stability.
Because they did everything possible.
Yeah. They executed with total totality.
Yeah.
There's no agonizing echo of what if left to haunt them.
So how do you cross into that totality?
True commitment requires aggressively burning the bridges that lead back to your old life. It requires permanently sealing the escape
A
routes.
little plan B.
It demands that you build the capacity to say an unyielding no a vast magnitude of times.
Saying no to what?
To easy comforts, social distractions, and the pull of entropy, all in order to fiercely protect the ultimate vision of the new identity.
You literally have to make psychological and physical retreat an impossibility.
Yes.
And this brings us to what might be the most profound, perhaps even mind-bending part of this entire analysis.
I would hear it.
The idea that this intense, seemingly isolated personal commitment does not just stop at the boundary of our own skin, it ripples outward.
A collective impact.
Right. It brings us to the psychological and sociological concept of shared reality and how our internal state actually infects the people around us.
We must fundamentally understand that human beings do not exist in isolated, hermetically sealed emotional vacuums.
We're always bleeding onto each other.
Exactly. Our individual consciousness, our internal neurological state, is constantly overlapping and interacting with an endless sea of other nervous systems.
How does that happen biologically?
Through mechanisms like mirror neurons and limbic resonance, we are continuously broadcasting our internal frequency into the shared fabric of our social reality.
So we are essentially Wi-Fi routers for emotion.
That's a great way to think of it. We constantly co-regulate each other's nervous systems.
So when you walk into a physical space, whether it is your family household, a high-stakes business meeting, or even just a crowded public space, you are not merely transporting your physical body into that room.
You're bringing everything.
You are bringing the entire invisible weather system of your internal state, and that weather system immediately begins interacting with everyone else's.
That is exactly how the biology of social interaction functions. When an individual has truly done this grueling internal work, when they have achieved absolute internal stability, solidly anchored their new identity, and locked in their unyielding commitment, their mind becomes an incredibly powerful anchoring node in that shared social space.
An anchoring node.
In any environment where multiple human minds overlap, the most stable, highly ordered consciousness will silently, inevitably, and gravitationally calibrate the chaotic minds around it.
This completely upends our traditional corporate definition of leadership.
It really does.
Because we are usually taught to think of leadership as whoever possesses the loudest voice in the room, or whoever holds the highest organizational title, or whoever can verbally dominate the flow of the conversation.
That is merely vocal dominance and structural authority. It is not true leadership.
What is true leadership, then?
True. Profound leadership operates as a silent, undeniable, gravitational pull.
A pull, not a push.
Exactly. When your internal neurological state is fiercely centered, completely devoid of the panic of partial commitment, other human nervous systems will unconsciously detect that stability and immediately begin to orient themselves around your calm.
They just sync up to you.
The people in the room will not even consciously understand why they suddenly feel a deeper sense of psychological safety.
Or why they can suddenly focus.
Right. Why their own erratic thoughts suddenly feel more organized and coherent in your presence. But their biology will naturally adapt to match your frequency.
Because you are the strongest signal.
You stabilize the entire room simply by maintaining your boundary and refusing to be drawn into the swirling currents of their entropy.
It is genuinely incredible to realize that our own private, exhausting internal discipline,
The hidden work.
the quiet, unglamorous battle to simply lace up our shoes when we are tired, to organize the physical clutter on our desk, to ruthlessly rewrite the negative scripts of our identity, it is not just a selfish, isolated pursuit for a slightly better personal life.
No, it's not selfish at all.
It is actually a direct, measurable act of service to the collective human fabric.
Beautifully said.
By cleaning up our own mental frequency and lowering our own cortisol, we are literally clearing the psychological static for everyone whose orbit we cross. We become a functioning node of order in a massive network constantly threatened by entropy.
It is the ultimate expression of personal responsibility.
Right, because how can you demand peace from others if you don't have it yourself?
You cannot logically demand an ordered, harmonious, and peaceful external world while you are silently, constantly broadcasting internal chaos into the shared environment.
It's hypocritical at a biological level.
You alter the collective reality by first mastering the complex architecture of your own mind.
This has been a profoundly deep and challenging exploration today.
It's heavy, but necessary.
We have journeyed all the way from that suffocating, heavy feeling of waiting in a fading, disorganized room to the realization that we are not merely passive audience members sitting in the dark theater of the cosmos, helplessly watching life happen to us.
We are not victims. We are simultaneously the projector, the artist, and the master architect of the experience.
We shape the very physical and social fabric of our reality
Every single day.
through a concentrated, relentless cycle of effort. By refusing to surrender to the illusion of the perfect moment,
Striking that tiny spark.
by looking honestly into the diagnostic mirror of our environment to map the real terrain, by taking tiny, unyielding actions to tip the exact right biological dominoes,
Fixing the foundation.
and by rewriting the fundamental root code of our identity through daily physical votes, and aggressively burning every single escape route, we shift our existence from a state of passive decay into a state of absolute, undeniable creation.
And in doing so, we become the anchors that stabilize the world around us.
I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to explore long after this conversation ends.
A parting question.
Think back to that room you were sitting in at the very beginning of our journey today. If the physical universe around you operates as an immediate, unbreakable mirror of your internal cognitive state,
Which it does.
and if every single object in your room, every disorganized stack of papers, every point of friction in your relationships is actively echoing your own silent, hidden beliefs,
Just take a look.
take a moment to look around you right now. Look closely at the environment you have built. What is the universe trying to tell you about who you truly are at this exact second?
And more importantly,
What specific physical action will you choose to project into that mirror tomorrow?